Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Major League Baseball trade deadline has come and gone with a whimper. Which team benefited the most and who is poised for a deep postseason run? Also, we go to multiple training camps for firsthand reports on the biggest stories in the NFL, and the Patriot Way no longer exists.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
There's an old Pete Seeger song, "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" Where have all the blockbuster trade gone at the trade deadline? Sully from Locked On Major League Baseball joins me now. And Sully, this was a day where a lot happened, but I'm not convinced a lot changed. What stands out to you from the deadline?
This reminds me of one of those Oscar years where there were a lot of very good movies, but not one great movie. Yeah. So it's like, all right, sure, Nomadland won Best Picture. Okay, fine. It's not a bad. It's actually a very good movie. I just was like, okay, I get it. There you go. Or like Blake Snell winning 2 Cy Young Awards. It's like, well, you're the best one this year. And Nolan Ryan is going, really? Really? He has 2. I have none. There was a lot of quantity today. Gavin, with Crochet not being traded from Chicago, that was, to me, took a lot of the air out of the balloon today because he's a difference-making pitcher. And if you were a team like Los Angeles, like Philadelphia, like the Yankees, like Cleveland, that have a sense of, my God, we could win it all this year, adding him to your rotation would have made a huge difference. And I guess the White Sox said, overwhelmed me, and I think they were probably whelmed. I don't know if they were underwhelmed, but they were only whelmed. And so taking that away, Flaherty being traded to Los Angeles was good, but we were expecting something giant this year. This wasn't like Phantom Menace level disappointment, but this was kind of like, okay, that was fine. The Orioles decided to go quantity. I mean, they are a team that is in first place. Yep. Is on pace to be one of the top 2 teams in the American League. I think a lot of people think they have a very good chance to go to the World Series. And just by my quick math here, 1, 2, 3, 4, they have 6 or 7 new names that they're injecting into their team. And this is after trading away a couple of very popular players. So we're going to see, to me, the Orioles are the most interesting team at this trade deadline because they did so much for a team that, yes, they've had a bad month and a half. They've allowed the Yankees to hang around, even though the Yankees have been playing White Sox level baseball for 2 months. The Orioles should have a 5 or 6 game lead, and they haven't. But my God, they made a lot of trades and a lot of moves for a team that's still in first place. So you wonder if this is the Rubik's Cube that will help, or if this will be Yoenis Cespedes being traded from the A's when they had the best record in the American League in 2014, and then they almost missed the playoffs, and then they got bounced after 1 game. We're going to have to see. But and I'll say one other thing, because that's why you asked me on the show.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of Yankee fans are now burning Brian Cashman in effigy. And I am not a Brian Cashman fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think the Jazz Chisholm trade is already paying dividends. He homered again today. Yeah. And he is I call him a mother tarantula, in that sometimes when you have when you put a female tarantula in with a bunch of male tarantulas, all of a sudden the male tarantulas start moving like crazy. And the Yankee offense was stagnant, and you put in the mother tarantula, and they're starting to hit. And how about that for an analogy that made sense in my head? I love it. And I think that was a fantastic move on his part.
I think being whelmed is something that you can only be in Europe, I think, is officially how that works.
That's true.
I want to ask you about, you mentioned the Yankees. I'm glad, because I was going to ask you about them, but I was surprised when the Padres were as aggressive as they were, adding to their bullpen, bringing in two, I think, really quality players. But it's sort of like you're a couple games over 500. What do you really think is being accomplished here? That was.
I'll tell you exactly what's being accomplished here. There are a couple of games over 500, yes, but they also got off to a crummy start.
Sure.
And since right around Memorial Day, they have played as one of the best teams in baseball. And they have looked at some of the teams that have gone to the World Series recently, the 2019 Nationals, the 2021 Braves, the Phillies in 2022, last year Arizona. Those were all teams that didn't exactly light the world on fire during the regular season, but were equipped in the postseason. The Padres want to be that team. They want to have the super deep bullpen. They've seen having that pitching depth, what that means to some of those teams. And San Diego, who, by the way, are drawing better than they've ever done in the history of their franchise, still, even after removing Blake Snell and Juan Soto, they added added a rise, and they added what's his name? He just threw the no-hitter. He just threw the damn no-hitter. Sorry, there are too many names bouncing in my head for the Padres. They got still in Cease. Thanks for helping me out there. I'm sorry, when you have 50,000 names throwing across you, sometimes you forget the rotation of the Padres. But what they're trying to do is get to their third ever World Series and reward the fans there. So I think what they're doing is, all right, I think they think they're going to make the playoffs. And I think they think they're going to make the playoffs and be in there with an obscenely deep pitching staff. It may not be the 1995 Braves, but they're going to have answers up and down the rotation and up and down the bullpen, and hope they catch the Dodgers napping, hope they catch the Phillies overconfident. And next thing you know, they're facing off with the Mariners in a glorious World Series.
Stay up to date all year on the major leagues by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On MLB on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, we get firsthand reports from training camp around the NFL. No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. We got baseball. WNBA is going to be back before you know it. The Olympics are here. Plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. The MVP award in the American League may already be decided, and there's still 2 more months to play. FanDuel is giving you Aaron Judge or the field. The odds for Aaron Judge to win the AL MVP, -1,000. That's a lot. 10-1. The odds are anyone else at +660. All rise. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Our Locked On NFL hosts are on the ground as training camp chugs along. So let's get their perspective on the big stories happening right now. Let's start in New Orleans. Chase Young makes his debut at New Orleans Saints camp.
The New Orleans Saints defense strikes back. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. As the New Orleans Saints wrap up their second day of padded practices, 6th day in total here in Irvine. It was the defense that made a ton of plays today. Even though it started off looking like during 7-on-7s, the offense was ready to light things up in the passing game. Several pressures by guys like Peyton Turner, who was a standout today, along with Carl Granderson, and of course Chase Young, who again impressed as his reps ticked up and up and up. At one point, he had gotten a sack on a bootleg play action, which could mean great things for how Chase Young might be able to contribute to the New Orleans Saints defense going up against those mobile quarterbacks in 2024. And we also saw him end up stopping an end around by beating Taliesin Fuanga on the left side as Chris Olave was wrapping around. So again, another really impressive day for Chase Young, who ticked up, and this New Orleans Saints defense bounced back. For more, make sure you're checking out Locked On Saints. We'll be live later today.
Raiders camp so far being dominated by the Las Vegas defense.
I'm Hugh Myers from the Locked On Raiders podcast. Day 4 of Raiders training camp in Costa Mesa, California, officially in the books. And, well, it was another struggle for the offense, and as expected, right? The defense is 99.9% of the time going to be ahead of the offense. But you can see the offense struggled a little bit. It wasn't quite as fast as Friday's practice was. It was pretty intense on Friday, but the pads come on Tuesday. So you could tell that they were trying to protect their legs. Multiple times you heard special teams coordinator Tom McMahon say, hey, run 5 yards and then shut it on down. Save your legs, save your legs, save your legs. So they're not trying to overwork themselves. They're all excited about getting the pads on. The defense looks really good, like the defense is expected to look. Multiple times Max Crosby had his hands on the ball. Nate Hobbs had his hands on the ball. JB, Jacorian Bennett continues to have a really good camp. So another day in the books. Everything, is expected to go at the pace that it's going right now, but the pads come on Tuesday, and that will tell you a lot about this team.
Defensive changes on the coaching staff in Jacksonville, but it's the offense that goes to work when the pads come on. They need to shine.
Pads came on today at Jaguars practice, and let me tell you something, man. The unexpected happened. The offense actually showed up and showed out. Maybe they were waiting on a little bit of physicality. Maybe they were waiting on when they could actually get after the defense. Walker Little had a couple of nice plays. How about wide receiver Seth Williams, a young player out of the University of Alabama, who really had a good day. And Miles Cole on defense, late round pick, who showed up and showed out. The Jaguars are giving all of these young guys a chance to really make this team by mixing the ones and the twos and the threes all together. And the big news of the day, Trevor Lawrence was hot. Brian Thomas Jr. got into the end zone. All of those things happened today on the first day of pads, and I hope it continues for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Make sure you stay tuned to Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen.
The Commanders are going to be relying on a lot of young players this season, along with some very seasoned veterans, and a key rookie got some work in camp.
Towards the end of week 1 at Washington Commanders training camp, defensive tackle Daron Payne said that the unit wanted to hunt on day 6 to start week 2. His teammates put his words into action. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast. And day number 6, the first day of week 2 officially at Washington Commanders training camp, the biggest story leading into practice was all about Johnny Newton, rookie defensive tackle out of the University of Illinois, getting into team drills for the first time this training camp period. Earlier this offseason, missed all of rookie camp, OTAs, mandatory minicamp, but was able to return to individual drills at the beginning of training camp. And now here, after 1 week of training camp, able to get in with the team drills. Very first rep was lined up more of as a 5 technique on the left side of the defensive line. Absolutely came off the line with fire, beat his opponent inside and got in for what would be a practice sack. Johnny Newton looking good his first day, says he's not even gotten all of his speed back yet. And for more on Johnny, Washington Commanders training camp, and everything Washington Commanders, check out the Locked On Commanders podcast, 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
One of the worst parts about training camp every year is the injuries, as Colts fans know.
Incredibly unfortunate news today, as we have learned that Colts defensive end Samson Ebukam will miss the upcoming season with an Achilles injury. Hey everybody, this is Jake Arthur from Locked On Colts. Ian Rappaport reported today that Ebukam, who was injured during practice on Sunday, indeed has suffered a season-ending injury. Incredibly unfortunate news for the Colts. Ebukam was the team's leading sacker last year. Was a career year for him, 9.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. I think it was 17 quarterback hits. So it was his first year in his career that he was appointed as, the guy to lead a defensive end room, and he answered the call. This now means look forward to more of Tyquan Lewis and rookie first-round pick Laiatu Latu, of course. We'll have much more on this on Locked On Colts on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Coming up, the Patriot Way is long gone. The New England Patriots already look like they're in disarray for a slew of reasons. As Gino Camilleri tells Luke Braun on a recent Locked On NFL, the Patriot Way is no more.
You're trying to figure out a way to get back on track, and you try to go down this path. Let's get a Patriot guy and Gerard Mayo and bring him into the building and bring in this new quarterback and Drake May. Well, teams have taken that path, right? Luke, and your team has done it in Minnesota. You go and you get J.J. McCarthy, and you follow this same formula that has kind of been put together by many teams in the NFL. But the NFL is not a science. It is an art. And New England, they're trying to figure out how to paint yet again. And that's in a division right now. I mean, look at it. I mean, you're in a division where Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, and why can't I think of the other team in the NFC? Oh, and Tua Tagovailoa, who
just got a bunch of money. We'll talk about him later.
You're competing against 3 teams that know the window is now. Those teams know their art setup. They got all their supplies. They got all their brushes. They got their schemes together. The book is all dialed down, and they got all the pieces in place. And you're over there looking like the team that all of these teams were that they were when you were in this great spot a couple years ago, rather. You were the team that everybody was trying to get to, and now you're trying to get to where these teams are. That's the state of the NFL. Not everybody is so lucky to get Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre for 30 years and have competent quarterback play, and you have coaches that can sit in for at least a couple years and have continuity. In New England, you're trying to figure everything out right now.
I think it's fair to give Gerard Mayo some time. Like, asking him to come in right away and set the same standard as Bill Belichick just isn't fair. Bill Belichick could do the things that Bill Belichick did with the attention to detail, the exacting standards, all of those things, because he was Bill Belichick. And yes, early on in New England, he didn't have that gravitas, but he earned it by being a terrific coach. He can then set himself up for 20 years of success by honing in on those practice habits, by creating a system with the guy many think is the greatest football player ever, Tom Brady. It's all part of a process. It took time. He didn't show up and they immediately won the Super Bowl. That's not how it worked. And they still went through fallow periods. Just because Gerard Mayo is not Bill Belichick does not mean that he cannot keep the Patriot way going. And just because it's a little sloppy early on and things are not all exactly the way that they used to be doesn't mean that the Patriot way will not live on. It just might take some time. Then again, it might be gone. But I'm willing to give Gerard Mayo at least a couple seasons, 2-3 seasons, before we can say, look, this is just over. The Patriot way is no more. And finally, the U.S. women's gymnastics team, they're inevitable. Simone Biles is the super duper star, but the entire team, elite, Sanisa Lee, Jordan Childs, and Jade Carey, helped Biles make the gold medal a no-doubter. Well, okay, it did come down to Biles' final performance on the floor to seal the deal, but come on, you can't bet against these women. If you do, that's your own fault. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, which team is having the best training camp in the NFL so far? Plus, we get football. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.